As history unfolds, the tragic events at Maui Slope saw the death of Yang Guifei, and Emperor Xuanzong fled in a state of turmoil. At this time, Emperor Xuanzong made a dangerous move, which could lead to the country's fragmentation. He issued an edict allowing his 4 sons to act independently, each leading armies to suppress the Anshi rebellion. This would result in no clear leader among the 4, leading to confusion about who would become emperor. After the chaos, Emperor Xuanzong had 2 sons remaining in the capital, Li Heng, the 3rd son, as the central army commander to defend the territory north of the Yellow River, and Li Lin, the 16th son, in charge of the south. The 2 main forces were Li Lin and Li Heng, the 2 main. During the suppression of the Anshi rebellion, generals like Guo Ziyi and Li Guangbi played significant roles. Eventually, An Lushan was killed by his son, and it seemed like peace was returning. But then, Shi Siming emerged, prolonging the Anshi rebellion. Li Bai and his wife took refuge in Mount Lu. During their stay, Wei Zichun, an aide to Li Lin, approached Li Bai with a tempting offer, bringing 500 taels of gold to entice him to join their cause. Li Bai's wife, who was from a prominent family, advised against his involvement, warning that if Li Lin was involved, it would be considered rebellion, since Li Heng had already ascended the throne as Emperor Suzong. Going to join Li Lin would be seen as treasonous, but Li Bai, with his naive political thinking, saw it as an opportunity. He thought the outcome was uncertain, and that it could be anyone's game. Despite his wife's protests, Li Bai insisted on going, and eventually became an advisor to Li Lin. However, Li Bai's involvement had a negative impact because of his fame. Unlike lesser-known officials who could leave without much fuss, Li Bai's presence was highly visible. His support for Li Lin was used for propaganda, showing that even a renowned poet supported their cause. After being assigned a relatively insignificant position, Li Bai spent his time in idleness, engrossed in poetry and occasional strategizing. His primary adversary during this period was Gao Shi, the paramount military commander under Emperor Suzong. Gao Shi engaged in a decisive battle against Li Lin, resulting in Li Lin's resounding defeat. With Emperor Suzong firmly established on the throne and endorsed by Emperor Xuanzong, Li Lin's continued resistance against him was viewed as an act of rebellion. Li Lin's forces quickly disintegrated under the pressure, leading to his eventual demise at the hands of his adversaries. Afterward, Li Bai was imprisoned. In prison, Li Bai broke down, cried uncontrollably, and became mentally unstable. He wrote letters and poems pleading for leniency, and his reputation fell to a low point. Du Fu, in his poems remembering Li Bai, wrote, "The world seeks his demise, yet I alone treasure his talent." While the public clamored for Li Bai's execution, citing his rebellion, Du Fu stood firm in his belief in Li Bai's exceptional capabilities, advocating for his preservation despite the prevailing sentiments calling for his demise. In 757, during Li Bai's trial, Guo Ziyi, who had played a significant role in suppressing the Anshi rebellion, intervened on his behalf. Thanks to Guo Ziyi, Emperor Suzong eventually decided to exile Li Bai to Yelang. Li Bai took 2 months to travel through the 3 gorges, enjoying the journey. As a famous figure, he was well taken care of along the way, with local officials providing him meals. When he reached Fengji, he suddenly received an imperial pardon. Li Bai thought it was because the emperor favored him, but it was part of a general amnesty. Li Bai was relieved and wrote the poem The River Journey from White King City. At dawn, I left the walled city of White King, towering among the many-colored clouds, and came downstream in a day, 1,000 li to Jiangling. The screams of monkeys on either bank had scarcely ceased echoing in my ear. When my skiff had left behind it 10,000 ranges of hills. In 760, Li Bai hurried back and arrived in Jiangxia. He then went from Jiangxia to Baling to visit Dongting Lake. By the time he turned 60 in 761, Li Bai found himself suddenly branded as a traitor, a label that deeply frustrated him. In response, he decided to join the military to fight for the recovery of Hebei. Determined, Li Bai bought a red tassel spear, had it prepared, redeemed his old sword from a pawn shop, and set off with a thin horse and the spear to fight in Hebei. However, he fell ill halfway through the journey. His strength diminished with age, and his health had been further weakened by imprisonment. At this moment, Li Bai made his way to Dangtu County. The county magistrate, Li Yangbing, was widely known for his calligraphy skills. Despite his reputation, calligraphy wasn't valued much during those turbulent times. Artistic works were practically worthless, left abandoned even on the streets. Consequently, Li Yangbing, although a talented calligrapher, struggled financially, relying solely on his meager income as a magistrate. As Li Yangbing's term ended in 761, he needed to return to the capital. With Li Bai gravely ill and bedridden, Li Yangbing had to depart. He dispatched individuals to locate Li Bai's wife and son, but finding his wife proved challenging, perhaps residing in a secluded place on Mount Lu. Li Yangbing arranged a job for Li Bai's son, Bo Qin, at a local salt field, and left all the cash he had and some of his calligraphy works for Li Bai, suggesting they could be sold if needed. Though Li Yangbing himself was not affluent, he did everything he could to help Li Bai in his time of need. Li Yangbing had a high regard for Li Bai. Despite Li Bai seeking refuge with him during a period of destitution, Li Yangbing never displayed a hint of superiority. He told Li Bai, "In 1,000 years, you alone stand out," emphasizing Li Bai's unparalleled talent over the centuries. Surprisingly, Li Bai entrusted all his manuscripts to Li Yangbing, so most of the Li Bai poetry collections we have today are based on Li Yangbing's versions. As they parted ways, believing it might be their final farewell, due to Li Bai's failing health, Li Yangbing departed with a heavy heart. Li Bai even left behind a brief biography for his tombstone, tasking Li Yangbing with meticulously recording the details for posterity. It's truly surprising that with the onset of spring, Li Bai's health took a turn for the better, allowing him to wander freely once more. Li Bai was a wanderer at heart, known to embark on journeys with zeal. He often hired an ox-drawn cart, and would set off without knowing where he might end up. If there had been a public transport system back then, he would probably have used it to travel everywhere. He continued to visit old friends, such as going to Xuancheng from Dangtu County. During this trip, he wrote a poem remembering an old friend who used to make wine. Li Bai's final poem is called Song of the Road. Many people aren't familiar with it, so let's read it. Great rock flies and shakes the 8 directions. In the vast sky, its strength is insufficient. Remaining wind stirs through the ages, wandering the Fusang, hanging its silk rags. Future generations inherit this, but who will shed tears for Confucius's death? This final poem is quite melancholic. Unfortunately, no one knows the exact day of Li Bai's death. It remains a mystery in history. Whether he died by drowning while trying to catch the moon's reflection, as some beautiful legends suggest, or if he died of illness, as he was with his son at the time. In January of the year 764, the imperial court finally issued an edict to summon Li Bai to the capital. Unfortunately, by the time this edict reached Dangtu County, Li Bai had long passed away. The court posthumously bestowed upon him with the title of Left Assistant to the Imperial Secretary. This title was not high-ranking, but held significant prestige. Du Fu also had a brief stint as a left assistant during his career. In 799, the young poet Bai Juyi visited Dangtu County to pay tribute to Li Bai and wrote the famous lines, "What a pity his bones are buried in wastelands. With his earth-shaking poems, the world was loud." Li Bai's life was filled with enjoyment. He led a comfortable life and was a traveler who never stayed put. Yet, he had an unfulfilled wish, possibly due to his naive political ambitions. However, we should be grateful for the beautiful poetry he left us. I encourage everyone to keep a copy of the complete works of Li Bai close at hand, savoring its contents slowly. As a Chinese individual, there is no greater joy than this.